Hello all and welcome to this webinar on the 3 rules for loan agreements under RBI's Digital Lending Directions 2025. Just a few house rules before we begin. We'll take about 35 minutes for the session before opening the floor for verbal questions. However, if at any point in time during the session, if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box. We usually in these things take most of the questions up during the webinar because they usually pertain to something we're talking about at that moment in time. We'll also, as I mentioned earlier, be sending across a recording of the webinar within the next 48 hours. So if you have to drop off midway or want to send this to someone to whom you think it might be relevant, don't worry. Within the next 48 hours, you'll receive a recording. As enough people have joined, more joining as I speak, let's begin. So I'm Aditya, Head of Marketing at Legality. Before Legality, I was a practicing lawyer with experience dealing with banking disputes matters. I'm joined today by Shubhesh, our Senior Product Marketing Lead. He will be taking you through the demo of the DLD compliant flow later on in the webinar. This webinar is split into 4 sections. The first section will be diving into the 3 rules themselves, looking at the DLD and tying that to actual practical compliance. We'll take about 20 minutes for this part. And at the end, you'll have a clear compliance understanding as well as an operational understanding of how to actually action that compliance. In the second section, we'll go a bit deeper into the operational details on the actual backend logic that you need to configure to actually operationalize compliance. In the third section, we'll show you a DLD compliant loan agreement flow using our platform Legality. This will be about a 10-12 minute demo. So after about 35-40 minutes, we'll come to the fourth section, which will be an open Q&A where we'll give you mic access if you want to ask any questions. Once again, we'll be sending across a recording in the next 48 hours. And if before that, in the first 35 minutes, you have a question, please drop it in the Q&A box. So let's dive in. A bit of intro about the DLD. Most of you will be familiar with it. The DLD is nothing but a consolidation and streamlining of RBI regulations in digital lending over the last 5 years, right? From the 2020 Adherence to Fair Practices Code and Outsourcing Guidelines to the 2022 Digital Lending Guidelines to the 2023 Guidelines on Default Loss Guarantee. The digital lending directions essentially take these directions and consolidate them into one comprehensive set of rules, right? So the 3 digital lending guidelines on screen, the first 3 here, have all been repealed. They're no longer in effect, and they are all consolidated under the digital lending directions. The KFS circular mentioned here, of course, is in effect and has been re-emphasized in these directions, as we'll see shortly. So essentially, the DLD, digital lending directions, and the KFS circular are now the 2 main regulations governing digital lending operations. And the directions are wide and vast. They have a lot of specifications on things like default loss guarantee, the nitty-gritties of how to enter into a fintech partnership and more, right? This is not our expertise, and covering on all this will require several webinars, so we won't be covering those aspects. Instead, in this focused session, we'll focus on our expertise, covering only the 3 rules for the loan agreement leg of the digital lending journey that the directions prescribe. So the first thing to remember about DLD and loan agreements, and you can breathe easy here, is that if you are already in compliance with the 2022 DLG in terms of loan agreements and the KFS circular issued last year for your KFS, then you are largely already compliant with most of what we're going to cover in the next 20 minutes, right? The DLD doesn't actually add extra complications as far as the loan agreement leg is involved. Here are the 3 rules that we mentioned, the topic of this webinar, right? 1, the KFS circular must be followed. 2, borrowers must be, like in case of multiple lenders, multiple KFS must be displayed at the offer stage. And 3, a digitally signed loan kit must automatically flow to the borrower via SMS or email, right? The first and third requirements were already present in the DLG 2022 and the RBI KFS circular. So if you were already compliant, you have nothing to worry on the first and third. The second requirement is a new addition and will require some operational work, which we'll go through in a bit. So let's dive into requirement 1 first. This will also be a mini refresher on the KFS circular itself. And what parts of that circular that in our experience working with digital lenders, we find that digital lenders either don't comply with or find it tough to comply with. So clause 8 of the digital lending directions simply re-emphasizes that all digital lenders must comply with the KFS circular, right? There's nothing new here. It's just a restatement of what was already true, that last year's KFS circular applies to digital lenders. And actually, this took effect last year when the circular was issued. And there are 7 operational requirements under the KFS circular. And I've listed them out here. We won't go through them all one by one because that is enough content for a whole webinar. We've instead linked our KFS webinar here. If you want to go through it, we'll of course send the deck across with the recording. However, out of these requirements, we have noticed that digital lenders in particular still have some trouble complying with a few of them. So let's go through some of these now, right? The first requirement is showing the KFS at the stage of offer itself, right? Because before the KFS circular, the KFS was shown in many cases, not in all cases, many cases at the end during the stage of disbursal along with the final loan kit, almost like a disbursal formality. After the KFS circular, the KFS has to now be displayed at the stage of offer itself, right? Before execution of the loan contract. It's no longer a formality, like just another document to add in the loan kit, but it's actually a critical element of the offer itself. But in digital lending, the focus has mostly been on giving out a loan in as quick a time as possible, with seamlessness of the flow at the main product priority. As a result, a lot of digital lenders that we've seen still continue with the pre-KFS circular position, where they share it as a disbursal formality. Or in some flows, they show the KFS as a small link during the offer, which customers can easily miss. But the ultimate point of KFS and the KFS circular and the DLD's restatement of the KFS circular is to give borrowers a chance to reject the loan at the offer stage itself, right? So you need to build your process such that the KFS is upfront and center and visible and unavoidable, right? It should be in the customer's face at the stage of offer itself. Second requirement is that KFS, and this we often find doesn't happen with digital lenders. It happens with some, doesn't happen with some, is that the KFS needs to be in a language the borrower understands, right? Lenders often use a vernacular declaration where the borrower checks a box that, hey, like I understand English and the rest of the flow is in English. Or sometimes the digital lender operates on the basis that, look, my app is in English, they downloaded the app, they've onboarded on the app, so clearly they understand English. Unfortunately, this won't fly since the KFS circular is very specific, right? The KFS itself must be written in a language that the borrower understands, which they may not understand ultimately, even if they downloaded an app, right? Like they may understand how to download an app, they may not understand the English contents of the KFS because of the complexity of it, right? So what you need is a workflow where the borrower picks the language of choice at the outset, like in an ATM. The language then triggers a specific KFS workflow in that language where both the KFS and the KFS interface are in that language. So the DLA here, the digital lending app, must provide this screen selection interface. But in the backend, the language of the KFS and the opening of each language link into that KFS workflow must be facilitated by the RE and any vendors that the RE uses, right? So yeah, if you could see, the first step is probably on the DLA or the LSP providing the service. The second 2 steps are on the RE to provide. Third requirement in the KFS workflow is borrower acknowledgement, right? RBI specifically wants lenders to collect borrower acknowledgement on the KFS to show they've understood the terms before entering or executing the loan contract. What a lot of lenders do is they simply offer a click wrap on the KFS and get it e-signed at the end with the loan agreement. Or they give a KFS as a link which the borrower can click and download with nothing more than that, right? What you actually need to do is build out a workflow where the borrower actually views the KFS and then acknowledges the KFS in a way that's auditable, right? So that the RBI knows later that you are actually collecting clear consent from the borrower. And only after that should the loan agreement process be initiated. So that's the third point. And a final point in KFS compliance, a question we receive from digital lenders is about the KFS validity period mentioned in the KFS circular and whether it overrides the cooling off period in the DLD. Ultimately, these pertain to different time periods. Validity period for KFS is pre-execution of the loan contract, whereas cooling off is an option they can exercise after executing the loan contract, just like this timeline on screen shows. So that's requirement one, essentially comply with the KFS circular. Requirement two is it's a simple one to understand legally, slightly complex one to operationalize, right? So clause 6.3 of the DLD states that where there are multiple loan offers by multiple REs being showcased by the digital lending app or the LSP, then a link to the KFS for each loan offer shall be provided by the REs. And this is a requirement you have to ensure by 1st November 2025. Again, this sounds a bit simple, but when you unpack it, you realize the operational legwork you need to do. So digital lending apps, especially by fintechs acting as LSPs, often partner with multiple REs, right? This everyone on this call knows, right? Essentially like an aggregator of multiple RE offers, right? For customers, this offers maximum choice and of course enhances the appeal of a fintech journey. However, the RBI wants to ensure that at this stage, each offer is clearly disclosed. And they want to ensure this by having borrowers be able to view the KFS for each loan being offered to them. So let's say the fintech app does all the formalities, checks eligibility of the borrower. There's an automated algorithm which filters out the loan offers they are eligible for based on the check. This is, of course, something you pre-arrange with REs. And let's say there are three offers, right? Lender A, lender B, lender C, that the borrower is eligible for, all with different terms. RBI wants borrowers to clearly see each offer and be provided a link to the KFS for each offer as well. So at this stage, there must be a view KFS button where the borrower can click the KFS and view the KFS easily to see if they want to avail that offer or not. Again, this sounds simple. Like for the fintech, it's building this front end. But let's peel back another layer, right? Because to actually make this display of KFS links happen, you need multiple interconnected steps, mainly by the RE, but some by the DLA, right? So for example, step one, the borrower opens the fintech app, the credit check is complete. This is of course done at the fintech LSP's end, right? Then the fintech or DLA, based on the algorithm, has to source the various offers, right, from the empaneled REs. Here, the RBI places the obligation on the RE when the offer is being offered to the customer to actually provide the KFS link, because the DLD says that REs must provide the KFS link, right? So it's not for the fintech to generate this link, it's for the RE to provide this link to the fintech to display on the front end. Then in step three, the borrower is shown a menu of loan offers, multiple loan offers with the KFS link. Again, this front end displays up to the LSP or the DLA. Step four, when the borrower actually clicks on a link to view, the link itself must be hosted by the RE because it's the RE's KFS. Or if the RE is using a vendor, say like Legality, it's like the RE's account with that vendor, right? The RE is ultimately obligated to ensure that the link is viewable by the borrower. Like for example, just an example with REs that use Legality, they generate the Legality KFS link on their end and then pass it on via API to their fintech partner. Yeah. So the fintech partner here is just an integrating partner and is not responsible for the KFS link itself being viewable. They just present the link to the borrower. So then in step four, let's say the borrower makes a decision and selects an offer. Again, this happens on the fintech's end. And then in step five, when they want to proceed with the offer, the KFS and loan agreement process must also happen by the RE, right? So even if a vendor like Legality is used, the RE must facilitate that, right? Like the RE's Legality workflow must be used, not the fintechs. And then finally, of course, step six, which is the disbursement, which happens by the RE. So as you can see here, the fintech DLA LSP serves as a front-end display and integration partner for the RE, but the real heavy lifting of requirement 2 must be ensured by the RE. We will share this flow with you after the webinar. So that's two requirements done. The first one pretty straightforward, which most of you are already in compliance with. The second one, slight operational legwork, coordinating with REs, between REs and the app itself. Let's move on to the final one, the execution of the loan kit. So clause 8.3 of the DLD states that the digitally signed loan kit must automatically have, it says documents, but essentially it describes the entire loan kit. That the digitally signed loan kit must automatically flow to the borrower via SMS or email upon execution of the loan contract. So there's a clear there's an execution process that happens, which involves a digital signature. Then this has to automatically flow to the borrower's SMS or email inbox. Quite simple to understand legally. Let's unpack this a bit, right? For starters, the DLG of 2022 also said the exact same thing, right? Here are the two provisions side by side. The only real difference here, ultimately, is the footnote, where the DLD, in the DLD, it is explicitly stated that digitally sign means IT Act e-sign. However, this is not a legal change. This is simply a clarity change, right? The word digitally sign in legal terms has always meant IT Act e-sign, and it meant so in the DLG 2022 as well. But it's been made more clear in the DLD 2025, where they explicitly mention it. But before we come to that, let's unpack the flow a bit. There are three questions you really need to answer in this flow, right? One is who has to digitally sign, what type of digital signatures are allowed, and who sends the loan kit to the borrower's SMS or email, right? Who has to trigger the auto send? So the first question, what type of digital sign do you use, is easy to understand because as I mentioned, the DLD is very explicit about it, right? The footnote to the provision says that digital sign means as per the provisions of the Information Technology Act 2000, which essentially means a digital sign here means an IT Act e-sign, right? Now, this is very simple. There are finite set of IT Act e-signs in India. This means Aadhaar e-sign, whether via OTP, biometric face or iris. This means doc signer used for automated signing by REs. This means PAN e-sign and this means DSC token e-sign, right? So click wrap or OTP based virtual signs do not fall under the IT Act digital signature purview. So that question is answered, right? What type of digital signatures are allowed? It's either Aadhaar e-sign, doc signer, PAN e-sign or DSC token. It's only these signing types. Next question is, who has to do this digital sign? Is it only the RE or is it the borrower as well? So the directions themselves do not spell this out fully. All they say is digitally signed documents must flow to the borrower upon execution of the loan contract, right? This gives rise to two interpretations. The first one, what we call the compliance first approach. So here, the execution of the loan contract is fundamentally a transaction between the RE and the borrower. And the compliance first approach sees this and views the phrase digitally signed documents that is mentioned in the DLD as applying to both parties to the execution, right? The RE and the borrower or multiple borrowers. So in the compliance first approach, the RE digitally signs, usually via an automated doc signer. That's why we put doc signer here. And then the borrower also digitally signs, usually via an Aadhaar e-sign. Here, both are signing via an IT Act digital signature here, right? So in our experience, most banks and compliance focused REs use this approach. They anyway do it for branch-based lending and they extend it to their digital lending app flows as well. The other interpretation on the right is what we call the liberal approach, where only the RE signature is affixed via a digital signature like a doc signer. And for the borrower sign, a non-digital sign mode of electronic authentication is used, say a click wrap or an OTP-based virtual signature. The liberal approach fundamentally relies on your compliance team and how they read digitally signed documents in the DLD, how they actually read it, right? Do they read it to mean that only the RE must sign and not the other party to the loan documents, which is the borrower? Or do they read it to mean like digitally signed documents mean both parties to the document or all parties to the document have to digitally sign? A question we receive when we actually explain this is which one does legality recommend? We are not going to weigh in here because we can't provide clarity that the rules do not provide. Ultimately, the choice remains with the compliance team, right? Because the compliance first approach ultimately is definitely something we can say unambiguously is compliant because there's a digital signature at every stage. The liberal approach is not something we can explicitly recommend. It ultimately relies on an opinion by your compliance team because there is an element of non-digital signature by one of the parties. So that's the first part of requirement 3 done, where execution of loan contract happens via IT Act e-sign. We've listed the IT Act e-signs here and by the RE and borrower, of course, depending on your compliance team's reading. Which leads us to the next step, automated flow, right? Who sends the loan kit to the borrower's SMS or email? Let's dive into that. For this step, it's often easy to miss the word automatic in the guidelines, right? Many lenders think that, okay, look, they are doing it through an app, right? The borrower gets a download of the loan kit from the fintech app itself, right? Whether it's my app as an RE or whether it's a LSP app that I'm engaged with or I'm lending through, right? There's no issue, right? Apparently, because the borrower is receiving it on the app. This is a great flow from a customer experience perspective, but unfortunately, it would not be sufficient to comply with the DLD, right? Because the DLD expressly requires a specific mode of sending the final document to a specific location, right? It says you need to auto send it to the SMS or email inbox of the buyer. So even if you provide the downloadable link on your app, you still need to build a process that automatically sends the signed documents to the borrower via email or SMS, right? And this has to be done by the RE system, not by the fintech app. So you may still have it on your fintech app as a link. That's great, good for customer experience. But for DLD compliance, the RE needs to ensure that after the documents are signed, they are auto sent to the borrower via SMS or email, right? RBI is expressly mandating this like a specific technical flow here in order to comply, it's not specifying, okay, borrowers need to be displayed the document and do it in however like mode you wish. It's actively specifying a specific technical flow. And one small thing to keep in mind for this requirement as well, and most of you are probably doing this, is the rules specifically talk about being on the letterhead of the RE, right? So simply having a name and logo of the RE would not suffice. There needs to be a clear letterhead that the borrower can use to contact the RE if necessary. Again, I think this most of you would be complying with anyway. So that is how requirement 3 works. Using an IT Act e-sign, Aadhaar, PAN, DocSign, or DSC by the lender and borrower. And then once documents are signed, they must automatically be sent to the borrower's SMS or email inbox by the RE, right? So that's the 3 requirements laid out in an easy summary form here. Follow the KFS circular for that. Follow the 7 KFS requirements. Build a multi KFS flow in case of multiple lenders. And get loan agreements e-signed by IT Act electronic signatures and then auto sent to the borrower via SMS or email. To help you after the webinar, we've consolidated the slides we mentioned before for technical guidance to help you follow this checklist, right? So for example, here again is the 7 KFS requirements in more detail to help you comply with requirement 1. Here is the front end multi KFS flow to help you understand what exactly you need to build for it. And here is the backend logic of the multi KFS flow. And finally, here is a simple chart you can use to help you. Next slide, please. To help you evaluate your document signing process. Listing out, no, previous slide, listing out available sign types you can use and specifying the auto send to SMS or email. So simply answer these 3 questions for your own flow. Check your answers against this chart that we've given you here, and you'll be able to see whether your flow is compliant or not. We're almost at the demo stage, about 3 minutes. But before that, we wanted to dive a bit more into the technicalities and the backend logic you need to build and comply with the DLD, right? At least the loan agreement leg of the journey. We're also launching a small poll sometime in the next few minutes. Do have a look when that comes up and do answer. Now let's get back to the technical implementation logic. So first off, I wanted to answer the main overarching question we receive from people. Like, what does the LSP or the fintech need to do? And what does the RE need to take care of? Because all implementation work and division of implementation work flows from this question. In the DLD, at least as far as loan agreements are concerned, the LSP fintech DLA is simply the front end interface for the customer to experience. It's where they can see things and where they can click on things, right? And from after they click, they have to get redirected to things. This redirection, where they get redirected to, what happens in the backend, ultimately that heavy lifting has to be done by the RE. The RE has to ensure the correct e-sign platform is in place. The RE has to ensure the KFS is in a local language. The RE has to ensure the KFS link is sent with the offer that they are presenting to the app. The RE has to ensure the KFS acknowledgement is collected in a verifiable way. And the RE has to ensure the loan agreement is e-signed and auto sent to the borrower via SMS or email. So really the bulk of this compliance falls on the RE. Essentially all the compliance obligations we talked about here in this webinar are on the RE. The LSP DLA is simply the front end integration and implementation partner of the RE. So if you are a fintech working with REs, then push your REs for this compliance. You will have to help them out, like with actual implementation and integrations. But ultimately, the buck stops with the RE, right? And if you are an RE, audit your fintech process, your digital lending process, see if there are any gaps using the stuff we've shown you in this webinar deck. And then go to your fintech with a clear implementation plan, right? Your fintech partner. Ultimately, you have to drive this and not the fintech. They will act as at best as a consultant and an integration partner. But ultimately, you as the RE need to be the final decision maker, and the obligations ultimately fall on you. For your benefit, we've also prepared a detailed swim lane diagram denoting the obligations we've spoken about in this webinar. As you can see here, the front end is by the DLA or the LSP, and the back end heavy lifting is by the RE. So here the document execution leg we mentioned, right, is usually performed by a third party vendor like Legality. But fundamentally, it is the Legality account of the RE that needs to be used here, not of the DLA or the LSP. Thanks for your time. Now we'll move to a demo of Legality. As shown in the swim lane, a document execution platform is critical to actually complying with this loan agreement leg of the journey, whether you build your own or buy one. Legality is a document execution platform that is ready with DLD compliance out of the box. If you can go to the next slide. We have all the features you need to comply right out of the box with no real further features to build or further integration effort needed. It's easy to comply. You can do it and build and test it out in less than 2 weeks. We'll now show you a small demo to show you what Legality can do, just so you get an idea. It's like a 6-7 minute demo, and then we'll take questions. However, if you still have questions, please do mention in the Q&A box below.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope my screen is visible. Aditya, can you confirm?
Yes.
Awesome. So in this demo, we are assuming two things. One, the customer has already applied for the loan and they have received all of these offers from lender A, B, and C. Second, this customer is more comfortable in English. But let's say if it's a customer who's not comfortable in English, you can make your entire app in a vernacular language, and you can do the same thing with Legality also. How you do it with Legality, I'm going to show you in 2 to 3 minutes. So let's say they have all of these offers, right? A, B, C, D lenders, and they like this offer. So they'll just click on view KFS and it directly opens the KFS. Here it's opening in a new tab, but if you want, you can also open it within your app, or you can even send the link to the customer's SMS, email, or WhatsApp. So this is my KFS. It's pre-filled already by the data collected during application stage on the letterhead of the lender, or RE in this case. They'll click on proceed. They'll quickly e-sign the KFS. And as soon as they do this, they will be redirected to the loan agreement. So if you're using doing integration for KFS, in that case, you won't have to click this OK. Directly it will go from KFS to loan agreement. But because this is like a very quick ChatGPT based integration I've done, so that's why I had to click that OK. But for your borrowers, ultimately that won't be there. So this is a fully stamped loan agreement with the KFS and my loan agreement. I'll click on proceed, and then I'll proceed with the Aadhaar e-sign. It's going to take me to Protean. I'll give my consent, and I'll just enter my Aadhaar number. I'll just enter my OTP. It would come on my SMS. It's taking a little time. In the meantime, you can also configure this screen in with your branding if you want, or with the RE's branding rather if you want. So there will be a logo for the RE here. You can customize the color of these buttons and the background. Okay, so OTP is not coming from UID. Must be some error. But what I'll show you right now is the audit trail that was generated and the signed document for KFS while we wait for the OTP to come from UID. So this is the audit trail that gets generated whenever you e-sign a document. A similar audit trail will also get generated once the loan agreement is signed. So as you can see, it has all the details, who's the sender, who's the person who signed it. Similarly, if you look at the signed document, you'll see the signature also. Yeah, this is my signed document, and you'll see here is the signature that I did. I'll quickly just recheck if OTP has come. Okay, cool. Seems like something is not working on UIDI front. So what I'll do is I'll show you how to make this particular workflow. And in that, I will also show you how to. So this is my KFS DLD workflow. Workflow is like one-time configuration you will do for all the documents you want to execute. And every time you want to execute that document, all you need to do is enter relevant details of your borrowers. So let's say I'll create new. This is my KFS DLD V2 or Hindi. Let's say I want to make a Hindi one. So you can either upload PDF with your letterhead or you can use a template. So I have KFS Hindi template already in my sandbox added. So I'll just select that. This is the first screen where you have to select the document that you want to send out. So I'll just click on next. But let's say if it was a loan agreement and you would want to stamp it also, right? So you can just quickly toggle this on, use stamps, then select the stamp series you want to use. But since this is a KFS, this is not relevant. So I'll just proceed. And this is my KFS in Hindi. I'll click on next. Now this is the screen where you configure how many people need to sign this particular document. Since let's say there is only one person who's signing this. So this one person. Signature type, I'll just select quick sign, which is an OTP less e-sign that I showed in the demo. And you want to configure a language onto this. Since this was a Hindi KFS, right? So I would want my interface to also be in Hindi. So I would select Hindi and I would just click on save and I will click on next. So this is my document in Hindi KFS and I can just place wherever the ESIN coordinates wherever I want. Currently they're here. It doesn't matter, right? You can set as per your need. But let's say I want to change this. I'll simply just click on this custom coordinates and drop my coordinates. You can place as many coordinates as you want and then I'll click on save. Now, let's say you want to run this, right? You want to execute your KFS. You click on run. Everything, if you'll see, is pre-selected. My template is pre-selected. My invitee is also pre-configured. My language is already enabled. I'll just do this, or rather, and I'll send the invite. And when I click on sign, if you'll see, interface is now in Hindi because the Hindi KFS. So wherever you're collecting language from the customer, you can just pass that to legality and then the relevant workflow will execute as per however you need. I'll quickly check once again if the OTP came and so that I can show you the loan agreement process that was left again, but no. Great, then that's pretty much the end of the demo. Aditya, anything else you want me to show?
I think, Shubhash, thanks. I think we've received a question, but you can also share the deck, right? Before we just jump into questions in a couple of minutes, we will soon be launching a comprehensive playbook, a step-by-step playbook on KFS compliance, which has technical guidance on KFS implementation, legal analysis of the KFS guidelines, frequently asked questions, as well as vernacular language KFS templates. And this is all information you need to know to implement a compliant KFS flow yourself, whether you use legality or not, right? So this is free information we're giving you from our experience in doing KFS implementations. We're giving away all of it free of charge, whether you are implementing legality or not. This will tell you the A to Z of how to actually build a compliant KFS flow. So be on the lookout for this. If you want early access to this book, you can sign up for our weekly opt-in list. Once a week, we share with you either on WhatsApp or email, either a relevant regulatory update, a latest product update, updates about our webinars, or case studies from other lenders who are using legality. And of course, we'll be sending early access to our KFS playbook when we launch it in a couple of weeks. So do scan this if you want early access to that. And finally, before we jump into questions, we'll help you set up a DLD compliant flow if you want, right? So simply book a demo with us. We'll show you a custom demo. We'll set up a DLD workflow for you, and we'll hand over a free testing account with a DLD workflow to you for unlimited testing, right? Completely for free. So do contact us on our email ID, aditya@legality.com or shubhash@legality.com, and we'll get this up and running for you ASAP. With that out of the way, let's move on to questions. So we've received one question, two questions actually. So the first question is, can the KFS be included as part of the loan agreement for the customer to sign? Or must the KFS be provided and acknowledged separately before the loan agreement is signed? It's a two-part question. There's also a second part is, should the KFS link be hosted exclusively by the RE? So I'll answer the first question first, right? Can the KFS be included as part of the loan agreement for the customer to sign? Or must the KFS be provided separately before the loan agreement is signed? So yes, the KFS must be provided separately before the loan agreement is signed for the customer to take a decision, right? That's what the RBI KFS circular says, that REs like shall provide a KFS with all the details before the contract is executed, the details and acknowledged by the borrower before the loan contract is executed. And if you see the DLD as well, in case of multi-lender offer, there also it says that at the stage of offer itself, you must provide the KFS, right? So what's for sure is you must provide the KFS at the stage of offer itself, not together with the loan agreement, right? The second question is, what about the acknowledgement? Is it okay to provide the KFS? Borrower can either reject it or proceed and then sign the KFS together with the loan agreement later, right? Here we've seen two interpretations again. We've seen some lenders say that, no, I will collect the quick acknowledgement on the KFS first, finish that process, then move on to loan agreement, which has the KFS and everything consolidated, and get that e-signed, right? So that's approach one. Approach two is lenders say, look, I'll give them the KFS, I'll show them the KFS, give them an option to reject at that stage. If they do accept at that stage, I will proceed to sign and have them e-sign the entire KFS kit all at once. So there's approach one and approach two. In both approaches, there's a form of still acknowledgement of the KFS that happens, whether an I accept button or a more authenticated quick signature flow, right? It's not necessarily an Aadhaar e-sign on the KFS. It can even be an OTP based flow. It can be a simple scribble virtual impression, as long as it shows in the audit trail, right? So fundamentally, these are the two approaches. What level of authentication you want on your KFS, that's up to what your compliance team takes a call on. We do see some lenders signing it together, but they still provide it at the stage of offer. So providing it at the stage of offer is non-negotiable. You can't have the customer see it for the first time when the loan kit comes up. That's completely out of the question. Second is, should the KFS link be hosted exclusively by the RE? Now, the RBI does not technically specify this, right? That who should host the link, but the RBI consistently says that the RE is in charge of the KFS, right? Even in case of multi-lender offers which are hosted on the digital lending app, it says that the RE must provide the link with KFS, right? So we read into that to mean that ultimately the KFS link should be hosted by the RE. Now, of course, you can give it to the DLA and the DLA can also make the KFS link available. But that would be more from a customer experience standpoint. It would not actually comply with the rules which say that the RE must provide the KFS link to the borrower for the borrower to see. So that's the second question, that there's nothing specifically mentioned, but based on the way the RBI is allocating obligations, it seems like the KFS link must be hosted exclusively by the RE. The next question is, can we send the KFS directly through Legality or any other vendor? Yes, as an RE, you can ultimately send the link and you can use a third-party vendor for it. What the RBI is simply saying is it's the RE's obligation to do. So the RE has to ensure that the link is received. The RE has to ensure that the acknowledgement has happened, that the acknowledgement is stored in an audit trail, and that based on the acknowledgement, they're proceeding with the loan agreement flow, right? So ultimately, REs can still outsource this to certain third-party vendors based on the RBI outsourcing guidelines. And you can send it directly through a vendor, but ultimately the obligation will still fall on the RE. But of course, you can use a third-party vendor for it, as REs do, not just for KFS, but so many other legs of the journey, right? Another question is, can we send the KFS with the sanction letter or separate? So here I assume that the sanction letter is sent before the loan agreement, right? The sanction process happens first, then the loan agreement happens later. If that's the case, then yes, the KFS, we've often seen REs do this, where they actually club the KFS with the sanction letter. So when the loan is sanctioned, sanction letter is issued along with KFS. If the customer accepts both, signs the entire kit, then the loan agreement is done, right? So you can do that as long as it's before, right? Next one, how does stamp duty have to be paid on loan agreements? So ultimately, you need to look at the schedule and see what applies to your loan agreement. If you want to do it digitally, you can use a digital stamping service like Legality, right? Where in about 30 states, we provide digital stamping where you can procure digital stamp papers, have them affixed, and get the corresponding physical copy as well, right? So it's a process we can do for you. Happy to show you the nitty-gritty and the details of how digital stamping works. It's a subject, honestly, it's a significant subject. Like we can spend like 15-20 minutes on it. I'm happy to show that offline. But that you can do it digitally. We have been doing it digitally for more than 100 lenders. There's also some questions in the Q&A box. So the question is that the RE has decided to use automated sign under DSC, right? Digital Signature Certificate. DSC is an internal signer. Are you compliant with the IT Act 2000? So if it's a DSC token issued by a certifying authority, right, you are compliant with the IT Act 2000, right? DSC token, which is those USB sticks, or a doc signer, which is a form of DSC which is hosted on a server, right, issued by a certifying authority, then you are compliant with the IT Act 2000. So if this DSC is that DSC token, yes, you are compliant. If it's a doc signer, yes, you are compliant. I think the rule of thumb is if a certifying authority issues that signature, it's an IT Act electronic signature. We know of no signatures that a certifying authority issues which are not classified as IT Act digital signatures or electronic signatures. Another question we've received is deed of indemnity required in a digital loan? There is nothing specified in the DLD that there is such an indemnity required. These are again internal compliance calls that people take. A lot of loan agreements don't have this deed. A lot of them do. It's ultimately an option for a lender. It's not a mandatory requirement as far as we know. It's definitely not a mandatory requirement under the DLD. Do we have any other questions? Also, you can raise your hand if you have any questions. We can give you mic access. If you want to ask a verbal question, you can. We'll be here for about 5 more minutes. So please do ask your questions. And again, we'll be sending a recording within the next 48 hours. We'll just check the chat box once more. Also, a lot of these questions we've answered here. Thanks for asking them. We'll be sending across a written FAQ with answers to all these questions as well. And we've received one more question. Is DPN required in digital loan? And how to input revenue stamp in DPN? One, DPN is not required in a digital loan. It's up to the lender to whether they want to have a DPN or not. It's not mandatory. It's an option some lenders use for recovery proceedings because the belief is that DPN makes it easier. You can file a summary suit with a DPN to recover, which is a quicker mode of recovery than a lot of other modes of recovery. So it's an option, not a requirement. You can input a revenue stamp on DPN digitally through Legality. We have India's first and only digital revenue stamping service. So what you do is you place an order for revenue stamps. That order is made available in your dashboard, and via API or via dashboard, it can get automatically affixed to your DPNs as the flow goes, right? So for example, Shubhash is showing you on screen, you have the use revenue stamp toggle. Procure your revenue stamps with us and you can set what revenue stamps you want to affix. And this can all be automated via API as well. Next question is, can we sign the KFS and sanction letter at dispersal stage and then the loan agreements? Yes, absolutely. That's a completely, like, there's no doubt about that approach because ultimately in your flow, the KFS and sanction letter are being signed before the loan agreement is being signed. So if that is happening separately and loan agreement is happening separately, then 100% yes, you can do that. Great questions. Keep them coming. And as I mentioned, again, we will also send written answers to these questions along with the post-webinar email that we'll send in the next 48 hours. And yeah, if you want to ask a verbal question, please do raise your hand. I'm looking at the screen right now, so if you raise your hand, I'll be able to see it. If not, of course, happy to connect offline if you have any doubts. I have a feeling though, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I think based on DLD, actually, most people were anyway compliant with DLG 2022. So there's not much that you really need to do except for the multi-lender offers, right? Which not all, again, not all DLAs actually offer this. But if you're a fintech offering multiple lender offers, then you really need to comply. But if you already complying with the KFS circular before, and if you're complying with DLG 2022, there are maybe tweaks you need to make, but there's not much you really need to do. Maybe things like KFS localization, maybe things like what type of acknowledgement on the KFS, maybe things like that. But largely your flows, I think, would be compliant. But in any case, we'll share this deck with you and you can have a look internally and assess internally. And if you do need, and we've given you everything in this book to help you comply as well without really talking to us. But in case you want help with it, we are happy to connect with you. Any further questions? Cool. We'll just give it a minute. If there are no questions, we'll end the webinar. Thanks so much for people. Thanks for joining. Please do contact Shubhesh or I, whether you need help with any of this, whether you have any questions for us, whether you have anything you want to discuss in further detail.